After several weeks of town life, we aspired to get out into the real country, away from the noise and bustle. Our regret was therefore mitigated when the time came to say goodbye to our hosts, who had spared no effort to make our stay pleasant and profitable. Our route lay southward, and we chose Tinnevelli as our next headquarters, not so much for its particular interest as for the fact that its central position made it a stable point around which we could travel without the encumbrance of luggage. One morning at dawn, leaving our belongings at the Hindu Chatram, we started out with no very definite plan, except that of reaching a range of mountains which we had noticed in the far distance when coming from Madurai, and whose peculiar shape and color had appealed to our imagination. Several hours of bus journey under a blazing sun through scattered villages and stretches of parched land brought us to a small town. Here we tried to gain information as to the means of getting to the hills, which looked so near and yet seemed ever to elude us. In the Hindu coffee shop, where we took a scanty meal and made friends with the owner, we were told of a very holy place some 10 miles distant, well worth seeing, but which could only be reached on foot or by bandy. Our minds were quickly made up, and a few moments later we were seated on the hard wooden floor of one of these primitive but delightful vehicles, and jogging along as fast as our bullocks could trot. Century-old tamarind and banyan trees bordered the road. In open spaces under the shade of the leafy boughs, great heaps of unthrashed rice were being trampled underfoot by bullocks and buffaloes driven round and round by the men, while the women, standing erect and holding aloft flat baskets, let the precious grain fall to the ground in showers, the wind carrying off the straw and dust. As we looked upon the scene, so grand in its simplicity and so perfect in its beauty, we were carried back in thought through the ages to the remotest times of ancient India. We finally reached our destination, paid the driver, and let him return from whence he came, without troubling ourselves how and when we should get back. It was delightful to make no plans and to follow the thread of our destiny as it guided us from place to place. We had the feeling of living a splendid adventure in complete freedom, learning to cease being slaves to our old habits and desires of comfort, and not to worry about the way circumstances were going to turn out. The craving for the luxuries and facilities of life to which we are accustomed in the West often prevents travelers from seeing much that can only be found in remote parts of the country, where so-called civilization has not made itself felt, thus missing endless joys, experiences, and precious opportunities. The village of Cotilium, where we now found ourselves, was situated in a sheltered valley. A waterfall dropping from a sheer wall of granite ran past a small temple, where the worshippers bathed in the sacred stream. Palm and coconut trees encircled this secluded spot. Immediately above the mountain rose covered with a luxuriant vegetation. The atmosphere was intolerably hot, and after a while we were tempted to follow the example of the Hindus before us. Standing under the waterfall, clad in our usual Indian clothes, we received the most invigorating shower bath, much to the amusement of the Hindus, who were not used to seeing Europeans. Our saris were soon dry, and we set out with the intention of climbing to the summit of the mountain. A shady path wound up under the magnificent trees of unknown species, covered with flowers, filling the air with intoxicating fragrance. To all appearances it was springtime, yet the heat reminded one of summer, and falling leaves of russet gold made a thick carpet at our feet, giving the impression of autumn. The jungle was being thinned out in various places, and the underbrush cleared away. Approaching the summit, we continually met men and women running down the slope and carrying heavy bundles of wood, cleverly balanced on their heads. Their type struck us as being different from that prevalent in the south, and we learned that they are what correspond to our gypsies, recognizable by their distinctive dress of reddish material on which are sewn what looked like small pieces of glass mirror. Here and there under the trees appeared cone-shaped structures of dry mud, riddled with holes. These were the homes of the cobras, but though we looked attentively, none were visible, and their curious-looking dwellings alone testified to their existence. The serpent or naga worship still lingers to the present day, and it is the last remnant of the ancient Dravidian cult which the Aryans found established when they invaded and conquered the country. At certain times of year, it would seem people come to place offerings near the holes, it being considered auspicious to feed the sacred animal. At the foot of the peepal and other holy trees, these are the ficus, one frequently comes across stones on which are depicted two intertwined serpents, a symbol well known in the West. We followed a rough track and suddenly came out of the dense forest to find ourselves on the tableland of bare rock. An immense panorama met our gaze. Groves of green palm and coconut trees stood out on the red background of plowed fields, while the nearby mountains turned to a deep blue as the sun sank to the horizon below. It was a magic hour, filling the soul with inner peace and stillness, while heaven and earth seemed to blend into a perfect whole. On our way back, we were tempted to rest for a while on the side of the path, but no sooner had we sat down than we fell asleep. When we awoke, night had set in, and we had still a good way to go before reaching the bottom of the mountain. We had no torch, and the trees made an impenetrable dome overhead, depriving us of moonlight. The path was faintly visible, and there was not much risk of losing our way. However, we could not help thinking of the cobras, not to mention the small leopards, the cheetahs, which are frequently to be met with in all hilly districts. It was high time now to consider where we would spend the night, but it proved no easy task to find somebody who understood English. We finally learned that there were no hotels in the village, and that the only forest bungalow, several miles away, for various reasons, was not open. After some hesitation, we were taken to a house and told that we might avail ourselves of the first floor. 3 or 4 empty rooms led on to a wide balcony. Judging from the appearance of the place, it had not been lived in for many years. Not having brought our bedding, we simply stretched ourselves on the stone floor, from whence we could look up at the moonlit mountain, and soon fell into a sound sleep, lulled by the hum of a distant waterfall.